G'day, Brenda. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. Really great honour to have you on the show. Thank you for agreeing.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love doing these conversations with people because everyone gains something from it. And it's a lot of fun. It really is.
Who doesn't like talking about landscape photography?
That's right. Absolutely. And themselves. No.
I don't like talking about myself, to be honest. It's not something I do.
Uh, then you're on the safe side.
Yeah, that's it. That's why I'm doing the show, hosting, not being interviewed. Anyway, let's start the interview because that's what people are here to listen to, not us talking about. So let's start with, what does photography mean to you? What is it in your life?
Uh, it's a deep question to start with, Grant.
Yeah,
But
got to start with the big one.
that's right. It's everything to me, really. Photography for me started way, way back when I was a child because my father was photographing. And mostly he was just recording life and the family life. But it was magic to me. I remember thinking that it was such magic. That feeling has never left me. And for me, photography is a way to express my deepest feelings about the world around me, and that's really how I use it. I've made a living in photography. We'll talk about that probably, lots of stuff in my career, but ultimately it just comes down to just allowing me to express what I'm feeling in my heart.
Excellent. Excellent. I want to talk about that expression and try and draw out what is in your heart and why landscape photography is the medium in which you've chosen to make the expression. So I guess, what motivates you creatively? What are the things that you're seeing in the landscape that make you go, I've got to shoot that. I've got to capture that and share it with the world.
It's several things, really. First, I think it's that just I'm not sure what the word would be, but it's a response to nature and just feeling the beauty, seeing the beauty, and being in awe and wonder of it, really. What drives me. What stops me, let's say I'm walking down a trail, what stops me to make a photograph can be a number of things. It might be the light, because of course we're all chasing light when we're
Sure.
photographing, but it's the light might be hitting something a certain way. It could be that there's beautiful design elements of texture or pattern that grab my attention. And those are big ones for me because I think in my heart of hearts, I really love the visual design aspect of photography and how the elements are there in nature. And if I can bring that into the photograph, that gives me great joy. So those are some of what motivates me. But I think it's probably the main thing would be the experience I'm having motivate me. And if I'm having a great experience and enjoying where I am, then the photographs present themselves to me. Not like I'm out looking for something. It's just, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Or isn't that fascinating? And
Mm,
that then starts the process for me.
awesome. I think you touched on a couple of things that I want to talk about there. One, the design aspects, because composition in a lot of ways is all about design, and where you place the camera makes a big difference to how somebody is actually going to respond to what you're showing them. But I also want to talk a little bit about some of what you spoke about in terms of the experience. Let's start with the design elements and talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people sort of misunderstand composition, particularly when they're starting out and they think it's all about rule of thirds or the golden ratio or something like that. And yes, all of those elements can come into it. But I think a lot of people need to understand design to be able to actually construct a meaningful composition. Some people are able to do it innately. Some people are trained in it. Where do you fit on that spectrum?
I'm probably on the first part of it, and then I did train, of course, but it seemed like early on that was how I saw, that I just automatically would see the lines, the patterns, the textures that were there. And of course, a lot of that is in the intimate landscape, not so much in the grand landscape, although it is there.
Yeah.
It's just that in the intimate, you really see it and it really jumps out at you. And I think it's really important that people understand that, say, the element of line is critical because you are, in creating a good composition, you are drawing the viewer on a pathway through your image.
Yeah.
And the element of line can be a really strong factor in that. If you've got strong verticals or horizontals or oblique diagonal lines, all of those have a certain energy to them. And we get, seems like we get attached to a line quickly when it's in the frame and we follow that line wherever it's going to go. So then you have to think about, where is that line taking my viewer? And is it's brought them into the frame, but is it zipping them right out the other side? Or is it taking them on a more gentle journey through the scene the way I hope, so that they stay a while?
Yeah.
So, a rough way of saying it, that's just one thing. I think a lot of people they don't necessarily think about their frame also. Okay, the shape of the frame is what we have to work with. And so any elements of line or pattern or shape and form have to fit within that frame in a way that really brings out the subject the way you want and what you're trying to express. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, good.
You touched on something there that I'm also wanting to dig a little bit deeper into, and that is how you actually select the subject and place it in the frame in relationship to lines and shapes that are around it. And it is important, I think, when you're constructing a composition, and I use that term deliberately because it is a construction. Some compositions are fairly naturally there, and but it is dependent on exactly where you're placing the camera, and particularly with intimate landscapes, those micro movements of the camera, up, down, sideways, the tilt, the angle that you put it at, can make a massive difference to the feeling of the image. How do you think about your photography in terms of those compositional elements and placing them in the frame? Because I think, a lot of people, again, talking beginners here mostly, need, I guess, a little bit instruction in how to actually think about that and how those micro changes can actually make a big difference to the final image.
First off, you mentioned the rule of thirds, or the guideline of thirds, as I like to call
Yeah.
it.
I
And
don't like the term rule either.
yeah, but it's there for a reason. Historically, painters determined that an asymmetrical composition was stronger and more stimulating to the mind's eye and to our brains than a perfectly balanced and symmetrical composition. So even as painters, they were painting the tree in the right third of the frame of their canvas, or a rock, so forth and so on. They had to think about placement. So for me, once I know, let's say in the intimate landscape, once I know that it's this pile of leaves and the rock that have grabbed my attention, I start zooming with my feet and I start bending. And this is where I get my exercise, because I'm looking through the viewfinder and I'm moving around and up and down, as you say, and trying to determine where that subject feels the best in the frame. But I have to consider everything else that's in that frame too. And it's the art of exclusion, because we start with a very full scene and we have to simplify it and distill it down to a point where the subject stands out and is strong, and everything else in the frame is going to support that subject and not detract from it. So I start paying attention to, okay, there's a branch over here that maybe I can't get rid of the branch, but is the branch coming in at a funny angle? Can I shift so that the branch is not pulling the eye up into that corner? I'll watch my leaves and rock for the example that we have here. I'll make sure that they're not merging with anything else directly behind them so they stand out. And that again might be a movement up or down or left or right, because perspective is what's happening. And it's that relationship of objects to the camera and objects to each other that is critical. I remember a long time ago, a really long time ago, I took a class with National Geographic photographer Sam Abel.
Yep.
And I was thrilled to get into his class. I realized I was way over my head because everybody in the class was already a published photojournalist and whatever. And here I come along. But in that class, he taught us about those mergers and about the importance of leaving the gaps so that things didn't run into each other. And in quick moments when you have to work like he did as a photojournalist, he had to be able to see all that, instinctively move just a hair to make sure that her nose wasn't running into the banister on the railing or something.
Oh, sure.
And so that stayed with me, and I was able to apply that into a rather different genre, which as nature photography, you can take usually all the time you want to compose that scene if it's not wildlife or if the light isn't about to change radically.
Right.
And applying that really helped me see how important it is to simplify and to really move around until you just get a feeling in your gut like, "Oh, this feels right." And then you lock your tripod and whatever in place, and then you start finessing it from there. But that gives you your starting point.
Yeah. I want to move on to the other topic I mentioned before, which is expression and feeling. And for me, they're two of the most important things in landscape photography. It really is about how, in terms of my own photography anyway, for me, it's about trying to express the feeling of being in a place, whether it's a broader landscape or something more intimate, and trying to convey to the viewer the feeling that I had while I was standing there. I do a lot of seascapes, so you'll see a lot of water rushing past the camera because
Right.
that's where I'm standing. I'm usually knee deep in water when Abe comes in, and I want people to feel that they're standing there knee deep in water. So how do you bring that sort of feeling to your images?
First off, I think what you just described was an excellent example of what we have to do. We have to be engaged and very present in the moment in terms of what we're feeling and seeing, or what we're feeling about what we're seeing. And you're standing in the water, so that gives the viewer of your image the feeling that they've got wet feet. And
Yeah.
and that's really important. So it's a point of view that is very important in terms of how we express what we're feeling. And so there's a lot of opportunities that I've had where I've looked at the scene and I think, wow, this is a lovely scene, but I've had to ask myself, how can I position myself so that I'm engaging the viewer, that I am expressing what I'm feeling, whether it's water rushing past me or the snow is coming down, whatever it is. And the answer is usually just you have to get in touch with your feelings. You have to be able to, first off, have the courage to do that, because a lot of people are all about making the composition and getting a photograph, but they're not necessarily getting in touch with how they felt in that moment
Yeah.
about what they were photographing. And it comes across, it's like a perfectly, technically perfect image that lacks the spark or lacks imagination, lacks feeling. And again, going back to that Sam Abel class, I remember it took me like 3 days into that class to where I had a breakthrough all the pictures that he saw up to that point, he said, "These are nice, but they're postcards, and I don't see Brenda in those pictures." And I was like,
Mm.
"What does he mean?" And so through the process of going through lectures and then going out to photograph on my own, I came back on Wednesday of that class, and I showed only 2 images, and he came over and he kissed me on the cheek, and he said, "You did it. You got it." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So the question is, could I repeat it? But it was a turning point for me because I realized that I put myself in those moments more deeply. And I remember one of them was a guy rowing a boat towards shore, and I could hear the water. I could
Uh-huh.
hear the oars, but I couldn't see him.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to be ready. If he emerges, I'll have a photo. And he emerged, and the boats around him also emerged because fog moves around a lot. And I got this photograph just as he turned his head. And it was like, oh, wow, that was a special moment for me. Now, it wasn't a landscape, it was a person in that landscape, but that was the turning point. I felt it. So I think the main thing is that you have to clarify what it is you're trying to say, which is what do I feel about what's in front of me? What's exciting me? What's making me jump up and down with excitement and saying, "Hey, look at this is great. This is interesting." Or this is scary, whatever it might be. And then work from that point of your feelings and work through, okay, how can I express that? What does it need, a fast or a slow shutter speed? Does it need a wide angle, or do I need to really narrow down my field of view and so forth? So once you've clarified your vision, a lot of those other questions that are technical questions get answered as long as you keep bringing it back to what you felt and what you're still feeling, hopefully, as you make the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember the first landscape photo? Pardon me. Do you remember the first landscape photo that you captured that made you feel this is it? This is what I want to do? And what was that moment like?
I'd have to say, no, not the
Okay.
top of my head. Yeah, I mean, because initially my photography might be a landscape, but it had a person in it.
Yeah. So,
And so I was discovering who I was and what I wanted to be as a photographer. And nature was always the love for me, and the landscape, the beautiful scenery. I would say it probably was up on the coast of Maine
okay.
because I know that's where I really had the turning point of going more towards nature and getting away from some of the other work that I was doing photographically. But I can't remember specifics, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Many photographs ago.
I do remember my first one, the first landscape, and it was
I was just gonna ask.
yeah, it's a fantastic sunrise at a particular beach, which is a favourite of mine in Jarvis Bay. And you look across this bay, and the clouds were just being lit up absolutely gold. Not the red that everyone, the red and the pinks and everything, but this
Right.
was literally sheets of gold going across and reflected in the bay that we look across, and these headlands are silhouetted either side of the opening to the bay. And that was the one. And that was, to be honest, taken with actually, I think I've got it behind me, one of the Canon Ixus point and
Yep.
shoots, because
Yep.
that was what I had on me at the time.
Yeah. Well,
But it
now
was one of
you're gonna make me think about this after the podcast is done. I'm
oh,
gonna
no,
be,
no doubt.
what was my favorite?
They're all favourites, aren't they?
Yeah.
Your photos are like your children because you've actually put the time in to get out there and work to get them.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the influences on your work. What have been the greatest influences on your style and your direction as a photographer? Is it a person or group of people, a place, or something in nature that's actually guided and directed that influence?
Probably a little bit of both. As far as people go, Elliot Porter was a mentor from afar. I loved his work. And in fact, the reason that I loved it was because I have always been drawn to the intimate landscape. And looking at his work, I thought, "Ah, yeah, it resonated with me a great deal." And then as my own repertoire expanded and I found myself doing broader landscapes, there were the classics of Ansel Adams and several others that were like in the Philip Hyde, Charlie Kramer, some of the ones that I started to learn about. So people-wise, those were some of them. As far as contemporaries then, there's a whole list, like, I love Guy Tall's work and Bill Neal and so forth, and their work speaks to me. And again, some of it's because it's the intimate landscape, which I find really interesting. As far as places, somebody just asked me this the other day. They said, "What's your favorite place to photograph?" And I just had this blank look on my face because it was like, "Not again." And so my answer, which is an honest answer, is every place I go has gifts. And it really does. And it may not be, you might not get a great photo that day, but the places that I seek out are places that I'm fascinated by, and that is the Southwest desert of the USA. But as much as I love the desert and I love the red rock country, I also love mountains. I love being around lakes and streams and mountains. And there isn't any one place that is more my favorite, really. And every place I go, I think that because I'm approaching it from that point of awe and wonder, and amazement at the beauty in all these locations, then I see great things and hopefully make great things out of what I'm seeing in my photographs. Yeah.
I'll ask that same question in a slightly different way then. Is there a specific landscape or location that you have to keep going back to, that it just draws you in, that you go, I really ache to be back there?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of the Southwest, Arizona, Utah, Colorado desert, and the Sonoran desert, because the Arizona deserts are a lush desert, and I really am drawn to that. But I am also very drawn to Death Valley, and it's so stark there,
Mm.
and it seems so void of, like, what they people always call rich targets.
Oh,
It's
sure.
like yeah, at first, you think there's nothing here, and I know better. So I've made probably 15 trips to Death Valley,
Oh, wow.
and so it is a place that I'm drawn to, and I teach workshops there because I think it's a great place to upend people and into that thinking there's nothing here wherever they are, and to get them to slow down and to be present and open up and to see more deeply. And when they do, they start realizing that as bizarre a place as Death Valley is, and as stark as it is, there is a beauty in that starkness. And that it is not a wasteland, that it's got its own magic. And the light, the play of light there is really wonderful too. The Red Rock Desert, because of the red rocks and the green trees, you've got this riot of colors sometimes happening. You get into Death Valley, it's almost like you're photographing in black and white, even if you're not.
Yep.
But it teaches you a lot about your compositions and about the use of light in the scene. And I think it makes people better photographers if they go into a place that's visually challenging like that.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. As I said, I'm mostly a coastal photographer, so that 99.9 repeater percent of my work. I love a mountain and a waterfall and those sorts of things are great. I took a trip last year to Broken Hill, which is about 12 hours west of where I am. And it's pretty much, if you think about the outback in Australia, that's basically what it is. But it's so much more than that, because you go over a rise and you're in a different microclimate from the little gully or
Cool.
valley you were in before. So each rise you go over, and this you can actually see it on the drive out there. You might be driving along this gun barrel straight highway, but it'll go over these rises, and each little section is different to the one before because the
Wow.
vegetation is slightly different, or there's less vegetation. You go for some miles across a flat salt plain, which is just dead flat and small shrubs, no trees. And then you'll
Yeah.
go over a rise and there'll be all these 20 or 30 metre gum trees
Nice.
just grow in this little valley. And for me, it was just a totally different experience of going to something that was completely outside my comfort zone and trying to work with elements that I've never really had to work. And as you said, you do have to work a little bit harder because it does upend your thinking around your photography. But I think the value of doing something like that is, as you said, you're going to come out a better photographer because you've actually started to work with I guess, the tones and the light in different ways than you would where you might have a more active scene of water and water movement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of what I learned years ago was I gave myself assignments, and one of the assignments was to stay within a fixed area and make as many pictures as I could in that area. And
Mm.
Freeman Patterson actually started doing that in his workshops for years. He'd give you 36 frames because that's what a roll of film was.
Yeah.
And you had to go out and pick a spot, and you could only stay in that area and make those 36 pictures.
Well,
And it was a challenge for people. I found it exciting because you'd get at first, you'd say, "Oh, this is cool." And then you'd reach about frame 20 and you'd go, "There's nothing left. I can't make any more pictures." And then you get past that, and before you knew it, you were seeing again. But it was really just to force the point, is that to get at that we need to all slow down and really open up more. And I think that we get caught up in, especially today with social media, you get
sure.
caught up seeing all these great pictures of a place, and you want to go there and you want to go there and there to capture those. And I get it because I'm caught up in that too. It's, oh my God, I never saw that while I was there. I got to go back. But there's so much more there that is your vision if you just slow down and you close your mind off to some of what you've already seen. So I'm excited to go. I want to go to that place you just described because that really sounds fun. And
If you do come to Australia, I would recommend a trip to Broken Hill. And just outside Broken Hill, I say just, it's probably about an hour and 20-minute drive back east. There's an area called Menindee Lakes, and there's all of these permanent water courses there and large sort of round crater shaped lakes. They're not particularly deep, but they have all of these dead trees sticking out, these big grey dead trees everywhere. The bird life there, so if you're a wildlife photographer, there's plenty for you because there's thousands of different varieties of birds. There's the waterscapes, there's the gum
nice.
trees. Yeah, just if you do come, definitely go.
Okay.
It's really worth it. And yeah, it's a long way. You can fly from Sydney. We drove. If you're going to drive, take the time and to stop on your way because there's plenty to see in between.
Yeah.
It's like a 12-hour direct drive. If non-stop, it's about a 12-hour drive. Yeah, it's a fair old hike out there, but
Wow.
it's so worth it.
Well, I'm going to check it out online because I'm sure there's photos posted.
Oh yeah, a guy to have a look at is Adam Edwards, Adsy Edwards, I think he is on Instagram.
Okay.
He owns a gallery there now. He's only just recently set it up. Anyone listening, if you're in Broken Hill, go and hit him up. He's a great bloke, and I'm sure he does workshops and things out there and takes people to hidden desert places that not many people go to. And I think worthwhile catching up with him. But if you want to have a look at some really good examples of that sort of landscape, and his Instagram is probably a great place to start, I think.
Great. Thanks. Yeah. I'll definitely check it out.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, you mentioned setting yourself projects or setting yourself assignments. that is a very interesting way of setting things up for yourself. And I'm interested in people that do that. There's people that don't look at that creative sort of assignment or project or whatever as a means to an end for their work. But I'm interested in people that do that. Tell me a little bit about how you've set some other projects up and what your thinking is around that creative process.
I think that the projects came about because I've I've always had in the back of my mind when I started photography, it was all about being a fine art photographer. And then I got a little bit sidetracked with being a National Geographic photographer, thinking I was going to have that fame. And I did work for them a little bit, but not as a photographer. I sold stock, whatever. But the thing was, when I came back to really doing more fine art, focusing on that, I realized that it was bodies of work. I was starting to see in my own images, and Lightroom is a great way to see this, or other organizing programs like that. I was beginning to see that I have had a long time affair with trees, for example. I love trees. And so I have amassed a lot of photographs of trees. And I've done exhibits of themes like that in the past. And I'm also looking at books and or even small zines, the little e-zines that people are putting out that are collections that focus on a particular idea, a subject or an idea or so forth. And they're all ongoing for me. I don't know that they'll ever be finished. I certainly have enough images in my collection of trees that I could do something with that. But I'll always be adding to it. But what helps me, I think, by having an attraction to certain things, and that is the trees is one of them, water is another one for me. The attraction is that they hold a deeper meaning. I grew up in a part of New Jersey that was our property was 2 acres and about 3/4 of it was wooded. And so my childhood memories were running through those woods and making forts in the woods and just having a wonderful time. And not realizing it at the time, I was also privy to the seasonal changes. So I lived through the bare bones of winter. And then when the snow and the ice storms were there, and then when the first buds started coming out, and then the leaves, and then when they changed color because where we lived was deciduous trees, and those hardwood forests from there up all the way through New England just go ballistic. And so it was a riot of color. And that for me, it means a lot. And trees, I don't know, how do I express this? When I think about trees, I think about how grounded they are, not to be putting out a pun. The trees and the roots that they spread and the elements that they have to suffer through, if you will, hail and rain and lightning and everything else. And they just keep going. And I think that's true in nature in general. I'm amazed at how life persists in spite of everything. Life persists. And so I look at trees and I think, what stories could you tell me if you could talk about what you've seen and in previous eons? And so they're sentient beings for me in that sense. I'm drawn for that reason to trees. Water represents for me just that whole flow of life. Metaphorically, it's really about not just the moving water in rivers, which I love, but the different forms water takes. The magic being snowflakes and crystals of ice, and then icebergs. And I've had opportunities to just float around in a little Zodiac and spend an hour and a half photographing these chunky bits that come off the glaciers in Alaska. And they're not the glaciers of Antarctica, but they're every bit as beautiful and wondrous. And the details in them are just looking into 50 to 100 years of ice that is suddenly exposed to light and to air as it's capped. And it's just fascinating to me. So I have a body of work that's water in the broader sense, but I also have bodies of work that are about the icebergs or about flowing streams and the movement and everything that are in them. So it's hard to express cleanly because it's not like I say I'm going out to work on my water project today. It's just the images present themselves, and I make a really good image of water, and it goes into that collection. And then as the collections grow, I realize I've got something there that I could share. And I think a focused theme like that is great because even in your curating what you're going to share in an ebook, a PDF, whatever it might be, the process of curating that is also helping you see in a more refined way at improving your eye as you're refining that collection down to, let's say, 20 images or 30 images. And then you know where the gaps are, and you can go out and you can say, okay, now I know I need some trees that are whatever, and
Yeah.
not go out
Whatever the
chasing
gap
that
is.
thing. Yeah, whatever the gap is, and you have it in your mind, and so the next time you're out in amongst the right trees or whatever, then that reference point usually comes up, and you say, "Oh, I'd like to get a shot of this."
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
How do you connect with a place before you photograph it? Do you rely on instinct and just go, okay, I know that there's shots to be had wherever I go. I'm just going to go there and see what happens. Or do you do a bit of research and do a bit of planning beforehand?
A little bit of all of that. I don't do heavy research, visual research,
Sure.
because I think that it can really confuse you when you see all these thousands of beautiful pictures of a place you're going to, and then you have to get past all those to see it for yourself. So I will cursorily glance at pictures, and we can't help but not see, like for Iceland, for example. I have yet to go, and I'm going to change that soon. But I've seen so many pictures of Iceland, I can't help not seeing them. And so I think I've already got a collection in my head of the magic and the beauty and the things that resonated with me.
Oh,
So if I was going to Iceland next summer, I would not specifically look at pictures of Iceland. I might, however, say, because I've done screenshots, I really like this waterfall. And so that's my reference is I want to go visit this waterfall and see what it's like at this time of year or whatever. So I also like to read about a place, if it's international in particular, but also just locally. I've been reading some of the historical books that are in the Southwest on the Native Americans that lived there before we took it over. And just through reading some of that, you also get a sense of the feeling that they had for why they lived there. And I think that adds to my own feeling in terms of photographing the place. And that kind of reading I'll do. And I will plan for it's not like a shot list, but I will say, I want to get sunrise at this point. And so that has to be a plan, of course.
right. Yeah.
So there's certain things like that, and especially leading workshops and tours, I always have to have a plan. Everybody says, "What are we doing tomorrow morning?" So it's like, okay, we have to make the plan. But I still, even with the plan to get out there for sunrise, I'm still trying to stay as open as I can to what is happening. Because maybe sunrise isn't happening.
Yeah.
And there's other things that are, but you can get caught up in, I really wanted that sunrise. I thought we almost had it. And then you've blocked yourself off from seeing what else is there. It's really, I think it's a sticky wicket, really, for a lot of us because you don't want to overplan. Some
No, no.
people are really good at making a shot list and they go out and they're going to hit all these highlights in the Smoky Mountains, or they're going to go to New Zealand and they're going to hit the South and the North Island, and they're gonna get all this stuff.
Yeah.
And if the light's great, then they've lucked out, but if it's not, then they've spent all that time getting to that point, and They have to be willing to look at what else is there.
That's it. Yeah. That's one of the beauties, I think, of landscape photography, though, is that you can't control the weather. You may have a pre-visualized image in your mind of a fantastic sunrise with glowing pink clouds and all
Yeah.
that sort of thing, and then you get there and it's just sheets of grey, or you get there and it's a complete blue sky. What do you
Yeah.
do? You
Yeah.
have to rethink that image and rethink what it is, or you've got to keep going back. And as you said, you're going someplace that's on a trip, then you might not get back to that for some years. So you've
Yeah.
either got to make a different plan while you're there and
Yeah.
work your way through it. I think a lot of people forget that, and I think it's one of the things that interests me about people, particularly those that want to chase those sort of iconic places. And I do it, and I'm definitely guilty of chasing
I
my
am too.
I don't think there's too many photographers that aren't. But when you do, you've got to go there with the expectation that you might not get the weather that you want, and therefore you've got to rethink what you're going to actually shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that for me anyway, I think the value for me is being able to be open to seeing what else is there has given me images that were surprises. I would have never been able to plan for this image. And if I went with just the landscape, the big scene, and some people do. I know several people that are just focused on that big landscape, wide angle, close foreground, formulaic, beautiful, but if the light's not there, that picture falls flat. And then what? They'll go back to their tent and they'll make coffee. So that's their choice and that's fine. But I'll usually say, okay, what else is here? What and I think because I have such a broad interest and love for nature in general, both the intimate and the grand, I can usually find something that and it's not like I'm just saying, "All right, I gotta make a picture, so I gotta find something." It's literally just saying, "Okay, sunrise was a bust, but look at what's happening over here."
Yeah, I don't think there's such a thing as bad light or
Right.
even bad weather, except maybe horizontal rain. That's not fun to shoot in. You still make pictures in that. It's just not fun to me. And I don't like being cold and wet, but I think there's always, as you said, there is always something if you look hard enough and you think about your photography in a way that opens your mind to finding those things. There is always light that can be used, reflection that can be used, different aspects that are going on. So if you've got grey, fair enough. If it's one total sheet of grey, it's very hard to get that. But usually there's some kind of texture in the cloud. So take a slightly longer exposure and get that cloud movement, because that's going to give some dynamism to what would otherwise be a fairly flat and dull image. And
Yeah.
so it's thinking about how you use what you've been dealt
Yep.
from nature and making the best of it.
Yeah. I remember the first time I went to Ireland, and Ireland is known for its cloudy skies and rain, and we were working on the west coast of Ireland, and we went out to this one spot, and the sea thrift or sea pink, some people call it, is a skinny stalk with a pink cluster of blossoms at the end, and it grows wild in amongst all the crevices of the rocks.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
beautiful. And in May and June, it's lovely. Our day was so cloudy, and I was like, oh, this is just so flat. And macro was great, but I was looking at this big landscape at first and thinking, oh, I really want to get this shot. And then I realized I was looking at the sky and I realized this is not just a solid sheet of gray.
That's it.
Irish light. Yeah, it rarely is, exactly. And I started to see that there were definitely gradations of light and dark in the gray and in the different textures of the clouds. And then I also, at that time, knew that using HDR process would bring out some of that even a little more. So I pulled out that technique too, so that I could bring the drama in the clouds out a little more. And I have one of my favorite pictures is because I went beyond the lamenting of the gray sky to really look at the gray sky and say, it's not just solid gray. There's something we can do with this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the opposite experience in one place, the Devil's Causeway up in Northern Ireland. And the day we were there, and unfortunately, it was literally a day trip because we were actually staying in Dublin. So we drove up from
Oh, wow.
Dublin and had to get back to Dublin because that's where we were staying. But yes, it started off quite a nice morning in Dublin. As we got progressively further north, the fog started to roll in, and we got to the Devil's Causeway, and it was literally like 2 feet
Oh.
visibility.
Visibility. Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, there won't be much seascaping. There'll be a lot of rock hopping and a lot of shots of those octagonal
Yeah.
slabs that are there. But yeah, a lot of intimate scenes of rocks and lichen and little flowers and things that were, as you say, growing between the crevices in the rocks. But yeah, not the spectacular scene of Devil's Causeway disappearing down into the water that postcard shots. Yeah, you just didn't see it. We did wait around for quite some time. It was probably about 3 in the afternoon by the time we left and came back. And yeah, it didn't move. It was just like that the whole time.
Yeah, yeah, it can be. I love that part of Ireland. I
Oh, it's
just love
beautiful.
Poland,
Yeah,
but
it's stunning.
yeah, but it can be really tough. I don't know if you know of him, but there's a photographer, Peter Cox, who had this
I
guy.
know his work. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. And it really proves the point when you know your home turf,
Mm.
you can get places for the light that you think is going to happen. Being in the right place at the right time is so much easier if you're really working closer to home, as he is. I mean, he can't get to everywhere, but he knows the forecast and he knows this is going to be a great place to go. And I think that's also interesting because a lot of people are caught up in oh, I'm going to take a trip to Iceland or I'm going to go to the Bolivia Altiplano and because I've seen great images from there. And you're going so far afield and you're throwing yourself into a totally foreign environment and you're at the mercy of the weather gods.
Absolutely.
And you may come away from that trip without a lot of great pictures because you're overwhelmed with having been there and you don't have enough time to really dig deep in when you're on a tour. And also you're at that mercy of the weather. But if you can make beautiful photographs within 100-mile or 20-mile radius of where you live, you're more prepared when you go into these foreign environments, for lack of a better phrase, environments that you've just not been in, but your skill sets are there and even your vision is honed to a point where when you land in a place, you can more quickly find something to work with. And I was trained as a photojournalist when I did continue on and learn photojournalism. That was part of the training is you didn't get to go for a week ahead of time on the assignment and kind of scope everything.
Get the shot, get out.
That's right. Yeah. And you got to figure out what the shot is and when the light's going to be good for that shot. So that was a really good trial by fire. But it did open me up and made me realize that if I hone my skills and my vision, then I can make a good photograph anywhere.
Mm.
Just trusting in yourself.
I think you touched on something that's really interesting to me there in terms of one of the things that I talk to a lot of photographers about on the show is their connection with where they live. You've got a slightly different advantage to some other people because you're living in a camper van. So that means you can live where you want to within reason.
Yeah.
And if things aren't working out weather-wise or whatever, or you're just bored with the location, you can move on. How has that shaped your photography since you've started doing that?
We've been doing it since the fall of 22, and I say we because my partner, who is in the van behind the curtain, he's Oz right now. But the two of us were very excited about it because for years and years teaching workshops, We would go and we would work with everybody during that workshop, and then at the end, we'd try to steal a couple of days for ourselves, and usually you were so tired, you didn't do much. You try to get out and get some photographs for yourself before you had to fly home or drive back home, and this has provided us with the opportunity to spend as much time as we want in any given area. So an example is in December of 23 and into early 24, we spent over 20 days in Death Valley,
Nice.
consecutive days. And it meant that we were there for weather systems. And if it was raining, we could just edit pictures in the van, keeping an eye on the light. When there was a break, we'd go out and we'd start exploring. And it's allowed us to really connect on a deeper level. And the images that we're making, we both feel very proud of because we feel like they're different from what we've done in the past. Not completely, but just that we're producing more of the work that means a lot to us.
Yeah.
So that personal work is really becoming stronger. And yeah, like you said, if the weather forecast doesn't look good, or I don't think we'd ever get bored with a place. Although I will say we get bored if we're in, like, stark desert for too long. Not really bored, but we were just in the Bisti Badlands in New Mexico, and yeah, very unusual hoodoos, very stark landscape, and it was so hot. And what happened was we found ourselves just losing our creativity after several days because the heat was wearing on us.
Yeah.
The sun was bearing down on us, and there was, like, every once in a while you'd get clouds and then there'd be nothing. There's different times a year, so we just decided, okay, let's leave. Our poor refrigerator was working overtime in the van, so we left for higher ground just to cool off and a change of scenery. But we know we'll go back because there's more to do there, and we have the freedom to do that. So we're still working. We're working full time. We do one-on-one mentoring. We teach workshops in the field. We're doing online webinars for various groups and whatnot. It's just a moving office, and it is great. The view out our office windows is amazing sometimes. And in fact, we have to put the shades up because if we need to get work done, it's too tempting to go, oh, look what's happening out there, and want to drop everything and go. So we've had to carve out the work versus playtime and just define it and set some boundaries now and then. We'll see.
You mentioned being or having that lack of inspiration for a time, and having the van obviously means that you can move and therefore change the scenery, therefore change it up. Are there any other ways that you deal with that struggle to find inspiration when you're sitting there going, I really don't feel like getting up for sunrise this morning. I really don't feel like going out and shooting another tree. How do you deal with those times that every photographer has to deal with?
Oh, very good question. For once, I've learned to, late in life, but I've learned to allow myself to feel that way because the shoulds it can get in the way. I should be getting up. I should be getting up. And then you're not inspired because you feel like you have to.
Comes a chore.
Yeah, yeah. I look at the weather, I make the decision based on what I think is going to happen, and I won't get up every day for sunrise and stay and go out for sunset every day. So I'll start to just slow down. I'll read a book, I'll go for walks and listen to music, and I'll go for walks without my camera, maybe just my phone. And guaranteed when you do that is when you see this picture that just takes your breath away, right? And you don't have your camera with you. But I think it's separating from the gear and just letting myself be in the area that I'm in without feeling the need to produce is essential. And ultimately, then the inspiration will come back. And a lot of that has to do with light and weather conditions, of course.
Sure.
But I think also that we laugh because when we started this, we didn't realize that we were doing something that few people are doing, and that is photographing almost every day.
Yeah.
A lot of us go off for 2 weeks or a week at a time. We take trips, we make a bunch of work, we come back, spend months editing it, then we go away again, maybe for weekends. And we're out here and we could photograph every single day. We were filling up our hard drives and we thought, this is nuts. We don't have enough room to carry all the hard drives we're going to need.
You
So
wouldn't have enough time to edit all the shots either.
there was that as well. And so we decided we needed to define times where we were just going to sightsee. We were just going to sit and read books and not photograph because we needed to just slow it down a bit. But I think initially it was that honeymoon period of, oh, we can go here, we can go there, we can do this, let's do this, let's do. And suddenly we realized that we were overwhelmed with editing.
Mm.
And that was a learning curve for us, but it's a fun problem to have. To be able to say, "Oh my God, look at the light," and run out and you're pretty much already where you need to be to make the photograph. Maybe you have to hike maybe a quarter mile, but for the most part, we try to put ourselves in positions where we're ready and we're able to get there in time when something's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you see as photography's place in society?
I think that photography I think it's a healing tool.
Okay.
I think that it's also, as any art form can be, it's an inspiration for people. And I think that how I view it in the work that I do is it's a way for people to perhaps connect with the beauty of our planet, even if they physically can't get out there themselves,
Sure.
that through photographs, we can celebrate the planet. And also through photographs, we can show what's sad and terrible about the planet, what needs fixing. All of that is part of it. But I think that photography really has the power to speak volumes about just about the world around us.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I know that's always through the filter of one's life experiences. So you see the world differently. I could be standing knee deep in that ocean and looking at the seascape with you, and I know we're going to make different pictures because we're having different experience.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the seaweed that was thrown in my face as a kid and all that stuff. I'm not crazy about the ocean. I love it. But there's things like that are going to maybe come forward, and I may not make the image that you would make. Because you're like, oh, I'm in my happy place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But still, even through the filters of our own life's experiences, I think the photographs that we all make have the power to show people just the awesome beauty of this planet and the need to preserve it. Hopefully that gets in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's like any art, expressive and hopefully can impact somebody's life when they're viewing it in a very positive way. And I think that's possible, hopefully possible for the images that I'm making. That's my goal.
Welcome.
Really touch people on a deeper level.
Fantastic. What's the future of photography?
I don't know if any of us know. It is really an interesting question because it's changed so much since I got into it. But I think photography in some form will always be there. We experience things through our eyes, and that may be the way it goes into our hearts, but it's that visual, that impact of the visual, how that visual is presented and created is rapidly changing, as we know with our phones. Why are we carrying around all this weight, big cameras? But I think photography it'll stay the course for a long time to come yet, because it's how we define the world around us. Even if it wasn't nature photography, the pictures we make of our friends and family, that that is so valuable to everybody. That's not gonna go away. And I think that nature photography and travel photography and all of that is going to continue to just educate and inspire and hopefully help people appreciate what we have.
Definitely. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you?
The worst piece of advice was when I finally decided that I wanted to be a professional photographer, and I had been doing more nature photography at that time. So I quit my corporate job. I had some people saying, "Are you sure you want to do this?" But yeah, I quit my corporate job, and then I joined the American Society of Media Photographers, ASMP.
Hmm.
People there said, "Oh, you can't make a living off nature photography." And at that point, with zero income scheduled on the books, I panicked. And it actually distracted me for a number of years. I had bills to pay. I had to pay the rent. I had to eat.
Oh,
And oh my gosh. So I better photograph this egg carton, or I better photograph this brochure for United Way or something, because I need to stay in the business and alive. But every spare moment I had, I was out photographing the fields of flowers in Colorado, or I was up in the trees photographing the forests. And so it took me a number of years where I was able to establish the business enough that I was able to then redirect it to going into nature, landscape, wildlife more, and be able to write books and teach. But at the time that I did it, stock photography was starting to fall apart. So sadly, a lot of what I was doing that was for stock, then that avenue wasn't there anymore. Yeah. So anyway, I followed it initially, but I didn't stay on that track, thankfully. And as far as a best piece of advice, I think it probably goes back to that class with Sam Abel, if I'm remembering correctly, or it might have been DeWitt Jones, because the two were very influential in my life in terms of being me. Just be myself and trust that my vision is just as valuable as the next person's, and that what I'm seeing is unique and needs to be shared with other people.
awesome.
And coming from a lack of confidence as a child, it took a while for me to feel that I was good enough as a photographer. And words like that really helped. So the best advice was to be yourself and to pursue what you're passionate about, and trust that it's all going to come around and work.
Fantastic. I've only got a couple of questions left.
Okay.
Are there any photographers out there that you think I need to talk to?
Yes, and I'm not sure whether or not they do podcasts. I was thinking about this earlier.
We can.
But you can ask, yeah. One person is Richard Martin from Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and he's such an artist. He's got such a great eye, and I think definitely talking with him, I think it would be a wonderful podcast to have. I just recently met Wayne Stubbs,
Okay.
and
I know
and
Wayne's work. I
you
don't know
do,
Wayne
okay.
personally, but I know his
Yeah.
work.
Well, I just got to meet him. We were all at the North American Nature Photographers Association, and he was doing a
Nice.
presentation. I was doing one, and it was brief because he had to leave because he leads trips for munch tours and workshops. But yeah, I think that listening to him speak and what's coming from the heart, I think he would be a really good person to talk to. Sarah Marino.
I've
Oh, her
actually
one.
had Sarah on the show.
Oh, you did? Okay. I haven't gone through your list yet. And then another woman, Suzanne Mathia,
Okay.
she would be, I think, great to have on the show. And then Bill Neal and Michael Fry, they're friends of mine, but it's their work is great. And I don't know if you've interviewed either of them at this
I
point.
haven't, no,
Yeah, yeah,
just those two.
yeah. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if they are doing podcasts, but definitely reach out to them because Bill Neal just produced a wonderful book, self-published, called Sanctuary in Stone, because he's made his life around Yosemite. Even though he has this breadth of work from all around, he finally realized that Yosemite was home for him. And so it's leaning towards that thing we talked about, that he's been on all these other national parks and photographed, but he kept coming back and gravitating towards Yosemite and realized it was home for him. And yeah, yeah.
Thank you for those. That's fantastic. And I'll definitely add some of those to the list. My last question is one I've been asking photographers from the beginning of the podcast, and I've recently published some results on this question because it is an issue that a lot of photographers are really interested in. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
You know what's really weird? Before I answer that, you know how on is it Instagram, you get that little notes thing that
Yep.
comes over the bubble? Honest to God, 2 days ago, it said pineapple on pizza. I didn't write that. It was a suggestion apparently.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, I love pineapple on pizza.
What?
That is so weird that you're asking me that. And I just saw that and I thought, who put that in there? And then I realized it was them suggesting that you put little thought notes up there.
It's obviously a bit prescient. It's obviously been listening to my podcast, I think.
Yeah, it was just too bizarre, but yeah, I do. And unfortunately, my partner Jed doesn't.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah.
You're half and half,
Yeah,
but
I know we can. Yeah.
so you're the full Hawaiian ham, pineapple, and cheese. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And I can do it without the ham too, but
Okay.
there's something about that sweet, that
It's sweet and salt.
love it. And you?
I'm fairly neutral, to be honest. I don't normally order it, but if it's on a pizza, I actually ordered a pizza which did have pineapple. It was called a Supreme, so it basically had everything. Named it.
Yeah.
And there was pineapple. I'm not picking it off. I'm eating it. I don't mind it. It's been absolutely fantastic spending some time with you, Brenda, and getting to know you a little better. Where can people find your work?
You can go to my website, which is brendatharp.com. And then I have an Instagram, which is Brenda Tharp photo _ between the words. And Facebook. I'm on Facebook still. And I'm on Threads and I was on Blue Sky, but honestly, there's just too much and only so many hours in a day. So I'm sticking to mostly Instagram and Facebook these days. And probably will be starting up a blog again on my website.
Okay, awesome. Look forward to seeing that.
Great.
All right, thank you once again. It's been great talking to you, Brenda.
Same here, Grant. This was really a lot of fun. Really great to get to know you too.
Excellent. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnephotography.com, along with prints and photography gear. I'm also on Vero, Photo, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.